Hello and welcome to Path to Power. I'm Matt Cooper.
And I'm Ivan Yates.
And indeed, power has transferred in the UK. Keir Starmer has become the new Prime Minister as a Labour landslide has taken place, but it's been described as something of a loveless landslide, given that they got less than 34% of the vote and yet have an enormous majority, which calls into question the way they vote in the UK, which we might get to in a little while. But I want to bring it back to Ireland first, if you don't mind, Ivan, before we get into all the ins and outs of what was a dramatic night in the UK general election and what happened to Ian Paisley up north as well, which is very interesting. But I was very taken with the speed with which Simon Harris came out to welcome what he described as a great reset in relations between Ireland and the UK. I may have missed it, but I don't think he's even said cheerio to Rishi Sunak. It was just like, we're delighted to see that there's a change, talking about the close relationship between the two islands, about the good relationship he anticipates with Keir Starmer, which I suspect he's very confident about, given that Keir Starmer's right-hand man is from Macroom and Cork, Morgan McSweeney, who has been essential to winning of this election. And given that within his own team in Leinster House is one of McSweeney's own first cousins. So he has reason, I think, to be hopeful of a great reset after the disaster of the relationships during Brexit. But I wonder, and I'll get to this in a moment, if we perhaps might be expecting a little bit too much.
Yeah, I think it's no secret that there was a huge low point in Anglo-Irish relations the particular week that Helen McEntee came out with the 80% coming over the border, that this was impacting on the Rwanda plan, that was driving people with secondary movements out of the UK into Ireland. And basically Sunak said, all right, Rwanda's working. We'll double down on the Irish here and say, this is why, because of the knock-on effect it's having on Ireland and so on. That was a real low point. And
one of many going back. I mean, when you think about it, we were in a great spot in 2011. Even though we were economically bust, our relationships with the British had reached a high when Queen Elizabeth came to visit in 2011. And even the British gave us a big loan to help us when the Troika was bailing us out, although there was self-interest involved in that. But then Cameron completely neglected the issue of the Irish border in calling his Brexit referendum. There was a complete failure, I think, to understand the potential implications, no matter what warnings came from Ireland. And then Theresa May, I suppose, probably did her best in what she could do, but was unable to get it past her own party. Then Boris Johnson came in the usual deeply disingenuous way that he had, and completely self-serving, selfish, and blew up relations between the two countries. And things did not necessarily improve. Well, I'm not sure Liz Truss had even time to think about Ireland. She was in the job for such a short time. And then, as you put it, Sunak was opportunistic in relation to the asylum seekers in recent years. So it's been pretty bad the way things have gone over the last decade.
I think in Leo's term with Boris, there was a particular point where they announced, was it in Merseyside or wherever?
The world.
A major accord and agreement. And typical Boris, he was disingenuous. He was facing, pro-unionist and being reasonable to Ireland and pro-EU. And then he broke his word on that. And then the Windsor Accord came, and it really wasn't quite what people said it was. And all the while, we've ended up with quite a hard Brexit. I speak to a lot of people with import and export to the UK, and they say the paperwork, that whatever excise terms that the revenue have gone for, they seem to be the most detailed and most difficult, and it's impacted on trade.
And I think the British resented us to an extent as well. I think they resented particularly the hard line taken by Leo Varadkar and Simon Coveney, who had to defend Irish interests. And I think they almost felt that their old dominion needed to roll over and let them have the Brexit that they wanted. And quite rightly, the Irish government fought at Brussels and did a brilliant job diplomatically in making sure that the EU held a hard line on giving the British what they wanted on the way out.
The other thing I would say that, when I was minister, when you go to an EU meeting, the first people you'd have a cup of coffee with would be the Brits. All of that is now gone. That sort of ministerial chit-chat, because you speak the same language, that's gone. But the word in the last 6 months was the Brits weren't even attending joint ministerial meetings. Like they just let the whole terms of the Belfast Agreement slide.
But then there are two things in relation to Starmer where I suspect people may end up being a little bit disappointed. He, as I said, has those Irish connections. McSweeney's not the only Irish person in his backroom team around, or many of the other new MPs coming in are, some cases, first generation Irish, definitely second generation Irish, with very, very strong relationships back to Ireland. However, when it comes to the idea of a border poll, he has shown absolutely little interest in actually accelerating the process in a way that, for example, if Jeremy Corbyn had become Prime Minister, you could have seen that would have been accelerated up the political agenda. That is not going to happen with Keir Starmer.
And given what happened in Scotland, Scottish independence is now dead for a decade, and because the SNP did so badly, and Labour cannibalising the SNP was all about being pro-union. So I don't see there'll be much progress in Starmer's era over a border poll. But I do think in terms of EU relations, I actually don't know if he's going to get a second term now, but in terms of re-entering the customs union, I think everyone needs to dial back their expectations.
Oh, sorry, that's not going to happen. In fact, that's what I was just about to come to, because there was a fascinating piece in the Financial Times earlier in the week where they actually asked him about the possibility of the UK under a Starmer government re-entering the single market. And not only did he say no, he doubled down on it so strongly. He said, not in my lifetime. So not even a question.
He's 61.
He's 61. So not only a question of, no, we're not going to rejoin the European Union, which you wouldn't expect, but you think is sort of a halfway house, a sort of a backdoor.
A rapprochement of some type.
Would be into the single market, into the customs union. He just ruled it out entirely. And even the Labour manifesto was against the whole issues in relation to freedom of movement. And I think you made an interesting point alluded to there that, he may not get more than one term, because this has been such an unusual election, and the results, because of the first past the post system, can just turn almost on a sixpence like they've done in this election. He is going to look, and if you look at the figures, Labour has, just as we come on to record this podcast, 34% of the vote, which is extraordinarily low to get over 410 seats. But the combined Conservatives and the Reform Party vote is actually higher than the Labour vote. And that's what he's going to fear, that the next time around, that if they in some way come to coalesce, and when you look at that, those who survived in the Tories are largely the ones who are the Brexiteers, who are the ones who are more likely to want to do a deal with reform, even if they end up getting eaten by reform. He will look at the numbers and say to himself that there probably is still this significant pro-Brexit rub that he's not going to tweak their tail even in government.
So my first take of analysing this election result is, broadly speaking, Labour on 1/3 of the vote got 2/3 of the seat. That could never happen under proportional representation and is a flaw in the first past the post system. Let me give you the classic example of that. Forest of Dean constituency. The Transport Secretary, outgoing Mark Harper, was beaten by 350 votes. Reform got 6,000 votes. And I could give so many more examples where the gap, the winning margin of a Labour candidate was a fraction of what Reform got. Like they actually...
So Reform put Labour into power partly?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a fair comment. So I would have always considered myself, you never say what your political view is, I don't hesitate. And so I would consider myself in the Irish political spectrum as a one nation Tory. I would have liked John Major. So I was particularly delighted that people like James Cleverly, even Sunak to some extent, but Jeremy Hunt got elected, Jeremy Hunt against the odds. And I'm equally delighted that Jacob Rees-Mogg lost his seat, Liz Truss, who I actually think, if you were to say, what was the point at which you came to the conclusion, leaving aside the 14 years and everything, that the Tories cannot win the next election? It was the Trust period, where they literally had an implosion of a budget that was utterly economically unsustainable. And actually, O-levels maths student wouldn't put forward to Westminster. So I actually think they never, like Partygate was a factor, and the whole kind of era of Johnson and messing and so on and being disingenuous, that did them damage. But I actually thought that there was nothing. Sunak had his problems with D-Day and the wet suit and
the gambling.
Yeah, and the gambling and all that kind of thing. And it was just one darn thing. But put it like this, and he's resigning as party leader, and it'll be interesting to see who the next leader is, and we can come to that. But I would say to blame it all on Sunak will be wrong.
Can I just go off on a tangent? You just put something in my mind there, because John Major, who you mentioned, is one of the very best political orators I've ever experienced. You know, everyone goes on about him being the grey, bland man. And
Remember
the
his
spitting image
soapbox
puppets.
he'd get up on?
Yeah.
Remember he get a little wooden box he got up
the
in?
spitting image, a caricature of him. He gave a speech in the late 90s in Dublin at Dublin Chamber of Commerce annual dinner. It was brilliant. He was one of the best public speakers I've ever seen. And here's another tangent.
This was between sleeping with Edwina and all that kind of good stuff.
I was just about to bring it to Edwina because I ended up one night out drinking with Edwina, right?
As you do.
Yeah, you see there now. This is a surprise for you, right? The circumstances
I don't really
were,
like Edwina, but go on.
Well, I'll tell you this much. I didn't like Edwina until I went drinking with her.
Okay.
Right? Because she was brought over to UCD.
Now, let's be clear, you were on water at this stage.
No, I wasn't. This was about 25 years ago.
When you were livable with. Go on. Yes.
You're starting to sound like Aileen now. But anyway, we were both debating out in UCD, in the debating society there, and we went for drinks afterwards. And I went along going, oh my God, this one, you know, what will she be like? She was the best fun. I had so much fun swapping stories with her in the bar. And there were a couple of others around as well, I can't remember. And actually, the funny thing is...
Did she talk about Major between the sheets?
She didn't go that detailed, but you could actually I could actually see why John Major had gone off with her.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So there you are now.
Well, we'll put it like this. So, as regards the next Tory leader, I actually think there's a case to be made, because Jeremy Hunt didn't stand the very last time. He had stood twice before. I think he fought so hard. He spent every one of the 6 weeks in his constituency fighting it, whereas Liz Truss disappeared in her constituency. I think he's in it not to go into government because they weren't going to go. He wants to be leader again. I think it's credible that he would be represent the One Nation Tory side of it. What the Tory party need to do desperately is not strategically follow reform over a cliff, which they will do under Braverman or some of the other headbangers.
Isn't it desperate that those are the people that survived?
Yeah.
That it was tend to be those who are more the One Nation centrist or even slightly left-leaning Tories who lost their seats. It's the provocateurs who have, with the exception of Hunt, who've managed to keep their seats, which is why I think it's unlikely that Hunt will actually win the leadership if he contests.
No, it's not odds on at all.
And he may not even want it, because he may not want to have to deal with this rabble. But, you know, one thing that really struck me as interesting, you've already referred to winning 2/3 of the seats on 1/3 of the vote. It's just a bizarre system. But that bizarre system has thrown up lots of other anomalies. I mean, for example, there are 4 Greens and 4 Reform candidates who have been elected. But the Reform got more votes than even the Lib Dems, who won 71 seats.
Record.
They got the equivalent of 1 million votes for every seat that they actually have taken, right? They won 12% plus of the vote. And you can say, well, then, thank God for first past the post. It stopped this enormous rush of Reform MPs into the House of Commons. But you do have to wonder, is that a fair system? The Lib Dems increased their vote by 1% and rocketed up with the additional seats that they're actually getting. Again, helped by the fact that in many of the constituencies, the Conservative vote was eaten away by Reform, and that meant the Lib Dems could get in. So you have all these anomalies all over the place, but what also shows that what Britain is going through at the moment is a bit like us. It's fracturing. All of this. So you've had the Tories and the Conservatives, I think, on a low turnout, a really, really low turnout, possibly because people felt it was a done deal, Labour was going to win, they didn't bother. But on a low turnout, it's something like 56% of the vote went to Labour and the Conservatives. The rest of it is split. Even to the stage where I don't think it's ever happened before in the UK Parliament. They have 6 independents. 5 or 6 independents. And what's really
Jeremy Corbyn
been one of them, but all the other ones are... It's a pro-Palestinian vote. It's in heavy Muslim areas
Midlands,
in the Midlands where people, the independents overcame the Labour people on the basis of the Palestinian position. So there's a couple of things in that. That's going to drive an awful lot of the Reform voters nuts when they see independents coming in from ethnic backgrounds like that, on an ethnic vote to an extent. But it also shows what maybe was one of the shortcomings of the Labour campaign, despite the enormous victory, was that Labour didn't tell us almost anything about where they stood for on anything. And I wonder, will that be the way, even in our general election, is that, you know, don't do the policies. Don't come up with it, because people only remember. Apparently, the three most remembered things from the election, Labour wasn't even in the top three. You've already mentioned them. It was Rishi Sunak getting soaked in the rain, Rishi Sunak leaving the D-Day commemorations, and the gambling saga. Those were the three most mentioned things in the polls.
Well,
nothing that Labour did to get itself elected.
So we'll come on to the first 100 days of Labour and what that might mean. But for the campaign, first thing I would say is that nearly always the campaign matters. You know, what happens in the campaign matters. In this case, Labour went into this with 42% and ended up with, 412 seats or whatever it is. The campaign didn't matter. The other thing that I gave me a wry smile, like if I was actually saying, okay, how will we plan out the 30 days? What will we get in the donut? Where will we do the first? Out of the copybook of the Liberal Democrat leader, Ed Davey, is it?
That's right.
He did bungee jumping. He did jumping into water. He did everything. I was almost taking the piss of stunts, but he got himself, and you kind of look forward to the 10 o'clock news on the BBC where, well, what's he up to today? And he came up with original stuff. Like that actually, I thought was clever because it was different. And it almost appeals to the quirky side of people who want to be anti-establishment but don't really want to kick the traces down.
Yes. So, but do you
First 100 days.
Well, actually, before we get to the first 100 days, this comes up every time after the British election, whether they need to actually change the voting system. But it never happens.
No, the big two won't agree to it. Yeah.
No, they just don't want, because
turkeys don't vote for Christmas.
They're not going to allow it to fracture. They'd rather see each other get into power in turn, rather than have coalition. Well, they had their coalition with
the same way here that they did away with private funding of political parties, and you can only get state funding if you get the votes first. Yeah. So we ganged up and stopped new entrants into Irish politics. So if the Brits do it, don't worry about it. But so the first 100 days, first thing, Rwanda will be shelved. Right? Oh, yeah. That could have an impact on some of the secondary movements into Northern Ireland, which I think is interesting. It might take some of the pressure off there. People who've actually been sort of illegals in the UK for the last 5 years and homeless and whatever, just coming to Ireland because they're afraid to be deported to Rwanda. Secondly, I hear, that there's no substance in their policy. But I, as you know, I keep waxing lyrical about planning reform. They have spoken very strongly about that. And I think getting houses built is about planning reform. He has put that top of the list. Also, offshore wind is something that they're going to change the policy on. VAT on private education. So I actually think there will be some things.
Funny, two of the things that you mentioned there suddenly made me realise there could be knock-on implications for us. If they get their house building programme going, that makes it more difficult for us to get necessarily the labour that we need for our own house builders, in Ireland. And the second thing is, maybe if they do get the finger out in relation to wind energy, it'll persuade our government to actually accelerate things in relation to that as well. So we can hope for that. So we'll see. I mean,
are you of the view that it's just a change mantra, that there's no substance to their policies?
No. I mean, they have to sell very little of their policies. But the thing about Starmer is he tends to operate by stealth almost. And if you look at the way that he took control of the Labour Party and took control of it from Jeremy Corbyn. Now, you could actually point out Jeremy Corbyn got 40% of the vote in 2017. And if Jeremy Corbyn had by some miracle clung on, would Jeremy Corbyn be the Prime Minister today?
No, I'm emphatic about that. He was unelectable, and all Starmer had to do was go up and down the country and say, I'm not Jeremy Corbyn, vote for me.
So he took over the Labour Party by stealth, has managed to change things, and I suspect that when he gets into power, now that he is in power, I think they will do things, and he's got a big enough majority to be able to do it. He may not have the popular mandate in that the turnout was only in the 50%, that he only had 34% of the turnout. But you know what? When you've got 415 odd seats and stuff like that in Parliament of 326 majority, it's more than that actually. Anyway, he's home and host. Well, he can do what he wants.
He reminds me, how would you describe Starmer if he had landed from Mars? I would say it's like you've hired your solicitor to run your company. You know what I mean? He is that classic legal eagle. He's 61. He doesn't have, he's fairly charisma-less, but is he a solid guy? Is he a safe pair of hands? Is he unthreatening? He ticks those boxes, and he just comes across as almost kind of a neutral type of person, but someone that you would trust.
What about the north? I mean, the big story up in the north, and I have to say with a certain amount of delight when I woke up to this morning to see Ian Paisley Jr. out in his arse.
Yeah.
I think great day for the north because he's some grifter. And I'll tell you why I say that. He can go off on a big long holiday now, except the problem is he'll have to find somebody to pay for it. Because do you remember he
was nearly ousted, was he?
Yes, there's 2 occasions this. He went to Sri Lanka in 2013 and had a holiday paid for, which at the very least was £50,000 worth of holiday entitlements between business class flights for himself and his family, 5-star hotels.
You'd have a problem with that, would you?
I would, funnily enough, yeah. And he got suspended for 30 days by the Houses of Commons for breaking all of the rules. And there was an attempt in his North Antrim constituency to have him recalled because from 2015 they've changed the rules and they just fell just short of the 10% of the electorate to mandate an automatic by-election. Now, he won his seat back again in 2017 and he won it in 2019 again. But then in 2020 it emerged he'd gone on another one of these holidays, this time off to the Maldives. This guy, anyone who knows, I mean, he just lived the high life over in Westminster, utterly cynical in the way that he is. But here's the bit that I think is really important. So he does all these things on a personal level. We still never got to the bottom of it, and it's too late now. But the Democratic Unionist Party spent 450,000 quid on a massive advertising campaign in London in the days before the Brexit vote. And nobody knows where that money came from. And the DUP has been the author of its own downfall by insinuating itself into the Brexit debate, in trying to prove itself to be more British by exiting the European Union. And what it has done, just like the Tories destroyed themselves with Brexit, the DUP has also destroyed itself with Brexit. And you can point to things like Jeffrey Donaldson being on trial at the moment, undermining confidence in the North and the DUP, but it goes further than that. And I'm delighted to see that at last Paisley, because of his duplicitousness in the way that he's carried on and the rest of it, has got his just desserts. Now, you can point out that Jim Allister is far more hardline and is appealing to those who are far more unionist and don't want to give an inch and all the rest of it. But you know what? It's the last sting of a dying wasp. This is the small, hard core who are going nowhere and who have actually undermined the union and their Britishness by overreaching in relation to Brexit back in 2016.
So I was fascinated by some of the results. We'll start with North Antrim, which is as you say, the first time since 1970 a Paisley was not elected there. That is epoch defining. And he shot himself in the foot. If you go to South Antrim, very significant as well. The DUP lost to Robin Swan, who was the health minister back in COVID, to Paul Girvan, lost his seat. So, first thing, real crisis for the DUP. It could have been worse. Gavin Robinson held on in East Belfast. I think people felt Naomi Long, look, you've got a ministry job in the administration. You stay there, and he survived that. Lagan Valley, another, Donaldson seat, lost. Ms. Eastwood won for the Alliance there. And it's actually quite interesting. You see, the Alliance has lost 2 here and they won 2 there. And the same, it wasn't all a disaster. But my serious takeaway of this is that unionism is in an existential crisis. So what really brought this home to me is, you're for supporting the union, and at the same time, when the MLAs weren't sitting, when Stormont wasn't sitting, how can you not want to make the direct union with Britain work through power sharing? You can't have it every way. And I thought that was a nonsensical position, because the people who should be most pro power sharing are the unions. So the first existential crisis is they're fragmented. UUP were top dollar. The DUP usurped them. Now the DUP have lost 3 seats, and Sinn Féin are the largest in the MLAs, in the councillors, and now in the MPs with 7. And Pat Cullen did very well to hold on in Fermanagh, South Tyrone. The Unionists hope to win that. So my question is this. Do we need to redefine unionism in the context of unity? Because the TUV and so on, like a confused mind doesn't buy. In terms of if you're a unionist, you want to make the union work. You want to argue for the economic strength, less of the tribal orangism.
And you know what the funny thing is as well? Alistair apparently is going to go and sit on the benches in the House of Commons alongside Reform. Right? The four Reform who'll be sitting beside the Irish bloc.
You saw that really interesting story in the constituency of North Antrim. Farage came over.
Well, is that to support Ian Paisley Jr.?
Even though there's a formal link between Reform and TU. Yeah.
That's exactly the point I was coming to. Like, so this is, and that just shows
That's bitter.
Yeah, well, that also shows you. I mean, Paisley, and the DUP's performance after Brexit in the House of Commons, and particularly when they briefly in the Theresa May era had the balance of power, they behaved themselves abysmally. They've had everything coming to them that is now coming to them for the cynicism that they showed during that period. And what they've actually done is they have undermined themselves, and by their being too clever by half, they have undermined the solidity of their beloved union.
But do you get my point? That this is actually going to enter into a period of reflection. What and who is the future?
Are they capable of reflection?
Well, sorry, they'd need to start thinking, because if they keep going the way they are, the Alliance will eat their lunch, the SDLP and moderate opinion will take over, and Sinn Féin aren't going anywhere.
OK, we will come back to more in Paths to Power, and we will get back to our own general election and the new likely date that we're going to suggest when we come back after this break. Welcome back to Paths to Power. So we've been talking at length about the British general election and Northern Ireland impact on relations with Ireland. If we have time, we'll get to the second round of the French elections as well. But what about our own election? Because we discovered this week the budget's been moved forward only a week to the 1st of October. And they've got these excuses about European meetings that they never worried about previously. But I think from that, my reading of it is we can forget about October 25th for the election, because you can't get the budget paperwork through in time, dissolve the Dáil and have the election. So we're now talking about November the 8th or November the 15th. I keep saying why I'm ruling out November the 8th. So I'm suggesting it's November 15th. And let me
I've
tell
consistently said the 15th.
And let me
January.
tell you a little bit of gossip I heard that at a meeting that friends of mine were at, and Micheál Martin was speaking to people during the week. He said, I'm a firm believer in governments running their full term of 4.5 to 5 years. And suddenly people go, hang on here a second. It's not 5 years anymore. It's 4.5 to 5 years. And the other thing, apparently, which he and Fianna Fáil people have been in detail gone through the local election and European Parliament figures, and something they're now very encouraged by, something that we have referred to previously on the programme, the level of transfers between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael candidates.
Let me plagiarise someone. So on the Pat Kenny show, filling in for the week, I was discussing this with Pat Leahy, and I was discussing the thing I've said repeatedly here: rough sleepers, trolley crisis, cash flow, bad weather, not good for incumbent. He actually said, a good phrase, he said, for the government, for Fine Gael, for Fianna Fáil, to hold the election in the spring would be an act of self-harm.
Yes.
And I thought that about sums it up. So first of all, in my mind, look, they've sent out a directive. Every selection convention for Fine Gael for 41 constituencies has to be completed by the 22nd of September. Detailed work is going underway in all the parties to complete the manifestos by mid-September. The budget is the best bounce they're going to get. Civil servants have been told the legislative programme is effectively going to halt with the summer recess, which is next week. So all of these things, I'm saying to myself, why are you being so asinine, Simon Harris and so on, saying so trenchantly, no, I'm telling you now the election will be in March, knowing that that's not the position. In other words, why would you be hoist on your own petard? It's perfectly reasonable for them to turn around and say, you know what, we'll do the election when we think it best fits into our programme of work, and it could be the autumn or it could be the spring. Either way, it's within 12 months. And needless to say, we will be looking at the most opportune time for us. That doesn't distract from government. It doesn't make them a lame duck. Why would you go spouting this nonsense that you're going to have played back to you when you do dissolve the Dáil in mid-October?
Well, could it be that he feels that the minute you even say that, you've effectively fired the starting gun?
It's a wrong presumption. It's actually, sometimes people make an idiot of themselves when they actually go with flawed logic. The flawed logic is, it's his prerogative to call the election whenever he wants, by agreement with Fianna Fáil. The Greens are on the way out. Well, the Greens are on the way out. As you'll see with RTE, what the Greens want, say with this Dublin traffic, what the Greens want and what actually happens now no longer is factored into any consideration. The Greens are gone.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about whoever takes over the Green Party next leader. We're assuming it's going to be Roderick O'Gorman.
Yes, next Monday, yeah.
And you assume he'll beat.
And I'm also assuming that Catherine Martin will re-enter the field if she's re-elected in the Dáil. Under their constitution, they must hold another leadership contest within 6 months of the new Dáil.
But could it be a contest of one? Will she even get her seat back?
No, she's more, because it's a four-seater, she has a better chance. No, and Roderick doesn't have a safe seat. No, like they're looking at oblivion, But so,
well, they've been in oblivion before, and they've come back.
That's right. But and that's tidal. It'll come in and it will go out. But I think first of all, it is significant that they brought the budget forward a week. I think Pearse Doherty got it right. It's a cock and bull story that the timing isn't anything other to do with election preparation.
Okay, so what sort of budget can we expect? Because it's been interesting over the last week that both Jack Chambers, as the new Minister for Finance, and Paschal Donohoe, as the Minister for Public Expenditure, are both trying to talk about cautious budgets. We've had the Central Bank now, the latest, coming out telling him to be steady as you go in relation to it. Much emphasis been placed on the amount of money of the excess corporation tax receipts that will go into a national savings fund. Could it be, we've all come to this expectation that there will be a big giveaway in the budget, but that the government may think, well, giveaways in the recent past haven't actually worked for us. That maybe they think that showing sense and prudence and saving for a rainy day will win the electorate. Because I have my doubts about that, to be honest. I mean, Paschal Donohoe tried to play that card in the 2020 general election. It didn't really work. Now, they can also say that their 2016 mantra of scrap the USC didn't work for Fine Gael either. But I'm still of the belief that, okay, and I know what you said, that there's already been many promises made at the Ardeshna, particularly by Micheál Martin in relation to child allowance and social welfare rates and indexing of the bands, that they're going to have to do something noticeable in relation to the USC.
You mentioned this with the USC last. Well, let's be clear, and just to recap, last April, McGrath and the leader's speech, Micheál Martin, the presidential speech, said child benefit will go up €10 a month, costing 148 million. Every social welfare recipient, most notably pensioners, will get an extra €12 a week, costing 900 million. Modest changes to PRSI. Every single taxpayer will get a higher entry point to the higher rate of tax, which will be 2,000. That'll be increased. That costs 500 million. And energy credits, as well as increasing the personal tax credits to 20,000. So there's no myth about this, and they'll do something on free books as well. So, like, the point is
free
this.
School books.
Yes, yeah. So the point is this, that it doesn't matter actually if Jack Chambers and McGrath had stayed on till November to deliver that. The budget is more or less decided. Now, there'll be definitely, over the summer, constituency trinkets of a public capital programme, because that doesn't have to be paid for instantly. So, but I mean, like this notion that, and I actually listened to a soundbite coming in this morning of Harris saying, you know what I mean, read my lips sort of thing. You remember that one before, read my lips? Was it Bush or someone like that? So basically,
yes, it was basically,
the election will be in March. It ain't going to be in March. Why do it? I mean, it's just nonsensical, and I thought he was cleverer than that. So and take it as read, because TDs are making their holiday plans right now. Their holidays now are to be at 7 funerals a week.
God, I don't know if we'll be able to make our holiday plans, Ivan. We'll have to be making our own plans for what we do between now and election day. We'll bring more details in future on Path to Power about what we're planning to do.
RTE?
What about them?
Well, no,
not for us.
No. So I think we are moving towards a situation. I had to laugh. The media committee came out after labouring for 2 years and a year and a half. Came out with a thing that the Exchequer funding was the model.
Abolish the TV license.
Exactly. And the chairperson, Niamh Smith, said, by the way, I'm dissenting from this, and the Fianna Fáil's dissenter. Like, there was actually no recommendation. I'm hearing there's no way that Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil will agree to anything other than a hybrid model. And, let's be frank about it. RTÉ have published a new direction. If you go for a blanket exchequer support, it kills in the water. It's a permanent bailout. It treats RTE the same as HSE. It will never happen. And all the pressure for reform is related to cash flow.
Well, you see, I'm also very interested, and again, I suppose you could say a vested interest in relation to this, given that I work for Today FM, which is part of Bar Media. We both have previously worked for Virgin Media Television, who do public service broadcasting. And Virgin Media is in saying, well, the cost of our news and current affairs is 30 million a year. We want you to pay that, or at least some of it. The independent broadcasters of Ireland, all the local radio stations around the country.
And community radio? Are
all saying, well, you've a 20% requirement upon us for news and current affairs. You can't be giving it all the money to RTE to have a monopoly in the market. I mean, when I say it can exercise a monopoly to an extent, it can hire people as it wants. I mean, it was interesting to see this week that, RTE is effectively bust. It's requiring a 20 billion bailout before it gets more money in the future. And it goes and hires, he's an excellent guy, Steve Carson from the BBC.
And Patricia Monaghan.
And Patricia, who I don't really know.
Yeah, no, I've worked with her since 2009. Yeah, I like her.
Because she's the managing editor of
Now, she'd get rid of 400 people before breakfast. You know what I mean? She's well able.
Okay, well, I don't know. I've had the sum total of one conversation with her. And because there's the demarcation lines between Today FM and News Talk, so I can't comment about her. But what I can say is between that and also they hired a commercial director from a Communicar Bar Media thing of Gavin Deans. Between the three of them, when you take all pensions and all the various other things in, that's a $750,000 a year investment across the three of them. Now, you could argue that, yes, RT has been shown that it needs cultural change, that you have to bring people in from the outside. But it makes you wonder that there was nobody we're promoting among the 1,800 people that they actually employ, and that this is a bust organisation which can make a commitment to this at the same time as they're still trying to pay off one individual for 400 grand to leave his position, where effectively, you know what I'm coming to.
Well, someone once advised me, Ivan, I'll give you one tip, because my business was growing from one betting shop to 63 betting shops. Don't let blotting paper policy overcome your business. In other words, where it soaks up more and more expenditure. RT reminds me of blotting paper. And let's be clear, there have been incremental changes that have really added to the subsidy for RT. TG Carr is completely now subject to exchequer funding. And actually, if you look at BAI funding and screens and documentary programmes and all their sports programmes, they're now covering racing like nobody's ever done. They're awash with money. That's what you get with exchequer funding.
Well, sorry, do you think so that the government will decide to divert part of the licence fee exchequer money to private sector commercial broadcasters, and indeed might it go further towards what we would call traditionally the print media, but given that the print media is having to pivot into digital between apps and websites and the rest of it, and doing video and audio as well, and finds itself up against RT, which, to the chagrin of many newspaper editors that I've spoken to over the last decade, has been able to use the licence fee to develop its own digital platform, its own website, a digital newspaper effectively.
A cabinet minister told me that it had already been decided that under Commission Numan, right, that there would be funding beyond RTE for public service broadcasting, and that definitely will be part of any package. So put it like this. I think people are black sick and fed up of the whole RTE controversy.
Absolutely.
And no less so politicians. They just want this closed off by the last cabinet meeting at the end of this month, and we don't want to hear of RTE again.
Okay, so we will be talking about that in one of the episodes before the government breaks. I know the Doyle ends next week before the government goes on its holidays.
What about my two lassies?
Well, we're going to get to that, because I'm going to say I think what we'll do is, I was going to bring up the Dublin city centre traffic, but we might hold that till next week when we have a discussion about the new leadership of the Green Party and where the Greens stand within government. But you want to talk about two retiring TDs, Catherine Murphy, once of the Labour Party, then independent, then co-founder of the Social Democrats, and also Roisin Shortall, former junior minister for the Labour Party, who resigned her ministerial position left and then was co-founder of the Social Democrats, and both have decided to retire. What would your assessment of these two women
Well,
be?
first of all, I know Roisin much better than Catherine, and I would say, first of all, for anyone since 1992 to be the longest serving woman TD in the country, that in itself is an outstanding achievement. To do so in Dublin Northwest, which is the heart of Finglas and really tough areas, requires special commendation. She fell out with James Riley, and you know what?
But that's to her credit as well?
Well, probably. The point about it is that she and Catherine Murphy had one thing in common. They were against the Labour-DL merger. And in fact, so Catherine Murphy's background is the Workers' Party, and coming from that direction.
No, so wasn't she more militant Labour?
Well, she won a by-election in 2005 as kind of far left, but she was...
Yeah, but not Workers' Party.
Okay. Well, the situation she...
I could stand corrected, but my view is that she would have come from back the sort of the militant Labour tradition of the 80s.
She subsequently lost her seat in the general election. And so while you had over 30 years of Roisin Shortall, just to finish on Roisin Shortall, I actually think... If you're Verona Murphy, if you're an independent TD, even Healy Ray, and you look at the career of Roisin, actually she never got to the cabinet, and I actually think she didn't fulfil her. She
was a junior minister, wasn't she?
She was, no, but she never got to the cabinet, and also she would have chaired the Sláinte Care thing. So it's not that TDs can't do something, but sometimes. Don't let the best be the enemy of the good. In terms of there's things you don't like, you've got to put up with in your political
compromise more.
Exactly.
Well, could I say that? I mean, from my own limited dealings with both of these women, and whatever, and I'm not displaying any comment about the nature of their politics or the ideology, but I would have to say that in my dealings with them, I felt they were two incredibly honourable and decent women. They are really. Just sort of good, decent people, like many politicians are. I know lots of people love slagging off politicians, saying they're only in it for themselves.
No, they're honourable. Honourable is a good word.
Honourable.
And decent.
I don't think they were in that for themselves. I think they genuinely believed in public service.
I want to ask you a question, because it's a business question, and it would have been a very vexed question from the other side of what's now the Bauer House, which is in News Talk. Dennis O'Brien, your biggest fan, and all this kind of thing. The whole SiteServe thing and that inquiry, in your opinion, as a journalist, right? I'm asking you, this was a really expensive, really long, drawn-out thing. She made allegations which caused the SiteServe inquiry to take place.
Murphy did.
Yes. Was that justified? Did the final report, because I didn't read the final report, and so therefore my question to you is this: were her allegations stood up fully? Because it seemed to me, while there was nefarious practice, it might not have been Dennis. But you tell me.
I'm going to kick for touch a little bit in this one, because
that's a shock. Yeah,
there are investigations still ongoing on the back of it.
Okay.
There are people who are facing issues in relation to what I will say about it is, in common with other inquiries, and there's another one that has been underway for 6 years at present, and we're still awaiting the outcome of it, and that's the investigation by what was now the Corporate Enforcement Office, used to be the Office Director of Corporate Enforcement, into the independent newspapers under the control of Dennis O'Brien, the things that it got up to. Why these things take so long? I know they get caught up in legal issues and legal rights and legal entitlements, but when there are issues of genuine public importance and public concern, why it takes, in this case, 6 years, and why it took longer, I think, in the SiteServe case, and why it takes tens of millions to investigate something is in itself a scandal. But it sometimes suits people.
So my question was, did the final report of SiteServe stand up what she said? Because people felt it didn't. That means yes.
Yeah, it was a very interesting report.
Okay. I love the way anything that impinges on your principles.
Some people might have come out of it a little better than perhaps they deserved.
Okay. I want to take two fallouts from their retirement. One is for women in politics and the other for the Soc Dems.
So we see in the UK over 240 women elected to the Parliament.
Did you see after the council elections, they did a review of, in Ireland, women representation at local government level were 22nd out of 29. In fact, it's gone backwards, if anything.
That's partly down to the social media environment that we have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's toxic for women.
I'm just saying it as a matter of
fact.
fact. I accept that. So, the first thing I would say there is no guarantee if Rory Hearn, who went for Europe in Maynooth, goes for her seat, that they will be replaced by women. The same, that's for Catherine Murphy, and in the north side of Dublin, I don't know. They have councillors, but it really does create a problem for the Soc Dems. I am sort of the view, if you nail me to the cross, will Holly Cairns hold her seat? I'm looking at the council elections. Her pony got beaten. Michael Collins of Independent Ireland could nearly get a second seat in. Christy O'Sullivan's going to be elected. Fine Gael be in the hunt with Tim Lombard for a seat. I'm saying I don't think Holly Cairns is going to get elected, and based on the local elections. Now, good luck to her. So, therefore, I'm looking at it.
Sorry, I would say she did actually say to me about one of our previous paths to power. She was quite annoyed that you were putting around the rumour that she was thinking of moving to a different constituency. Now, in fairness, I think you responded and answered a question that I put to you that came in from one of our
maybe
correspondents.
put in the bracket, it might be a good idea for you, Holly.
God, she's going to be even more upset now when she listens to this.
Put it like this.
And here's you suggesting that she moves constituency.
If you go through the 35 councillors for the Soc Dems, they are all in urban Ireland. They're not in, the arse of West Cork. You know what I mean?
There's nothing wrong with West Cork to describe it as an arse.
The point is very rural. So, but the point I'm saying is this.
But very sophisticated
when
as well.
two solid citizens leave, they leave a hole behind them. We spoke about this in Fine Gael in succession. I think it's a problem for the Soc Dems. It's not guaranteed they will hold those seats. They have 6 TDs. That is a definite problem. And the other thing is no guarantee that women will replace them. And that could lead to a further diminution of women in politics.
Okay. Listen, there's loads of other things we could talk about. Why do we leave it there? Are you going horse racing next week?
No, I'll tell you exactly. Would you believe it? It was much to my chagrin. So Patricia Monaghan rang me up in February and said, same as, would you do 2 weeks for Pat Kenny the first 2 weeks in July? Now he's probably taken 6 months holiday. They have Jonathan Healy and they have Anton Savage and all this kind of thing. Good luck to Pat. The point about it is, I was going to say now, what will I say? Because at Christmas, the kids came home from London and so on, 4 adult kids and 4 grandchildren, and they said, we're going to hire 3 cottages. Since 1970, we go to Tourmakeedy. There's no broadband, no nothing. I said, you know what, I'm going to send out for Divilment, a sort of WhatsApp group to the kids. Sorry, I can't do that family holiday, but I know I would have been really excommunicated. So I'm going to Tourmakeedy.
You have to be very careful. You have to know the answer before you question like that, because they could have all come back. That's grand, Dad. Sure, we'll go anyway. That's fine. Don't worry about us.
F off. The point about it is that I'm going to Tourmakeedy. It is guaranteed to rain every day. I'm not like you, where I go to a sunny climate and relax and have the sun cream and the cocktails there on the beach.
And
but
golf.
I'm going to, I don't know how this is going to happen, because I'm hopeless, as you know, in technology. I'm barely caught up with texting and emails at this stage. How we're going to do a broadcast from a broadband-free area like Tourmakeedy next Friday. Do tune in. It'll be a work of art if it happens.
That's all down to Aidan. He'll sort it all out brilliantly for us. Okay, that is it for today. Email at mail@pathtopowerpodcast.com if you want to get in touch. Please recommend us to a friend. Of course, you can find us at Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever it is you get your podcasts. And so until next week, where Ivan will display his technological brilliance.
Or may disappear.
Thanks for being with us.